911, what's your emergency?
It's Alyssa! Oh God! She's gone! It grabbed her. She was feeding the crocodile. Oh Jesus! It pulled her under.
Sir! Slow down! Where are you right now?
The Yosiki laboratory, Minahasa, please! You have to hurry! It's still in the water with her! I can see it! It's turning with her! It's not letting go!
Stay calm. We have police and paramedics on the way. Keep your distance from the enclosure.
It's huge! Its head is the size of a boulder! It's thrashing! Oh God! She's not coming back up! There's blood in the water!
Sir, I need you to stay on the line and stay safe. Do not go near the animal.
I can't just stand here! She's not moving!
Help is on the way. Do not go closer. Do you understand me?
God! It's looking right at me!
The morning broke still and heavy over the CB Yosiki Laboratory Pearl Farm in North Sulawesi, Indonesia. Normally, this secluded outpost stirred to life with the fluttering calls of tropical birds and the soft rhythmic lapping of seawater against the wooden stilts of the farm's piers. On most days, the place seemed like its own quiet world, far removed from the noise and chaos beyond Minahasa's shores. But on this January morning, something was different. The air felt thick, unmoving, almost oppressive. The birds had fallen silent, their absence leaving behind a strange vacuum that seemed to press on the chest. It was the kind of silence that makes the skin prickle, as though the world itself was holding its breath. That calm would soon be broken, not by the usual chatter of workers or the hum of machinery, but by a discovery so horrifying it would travel across oceans, a grim story, whispered from one news outlet to another, until it was etched into the global imagination. Beneath the farm's weathered walkways lay the concrete crocodile enclosure, a murky pool whose surface reflected the dull light of the overcast sky. It looked harmless enough, just another part of the Pearl Farm's strange patchwork environment. But within that still water, danger had been crouched for years, silent and patient. This was no sudden accident, no freak occurrence. This was the crescendo of a tragedy long in the making. A story born from complacency, missed warnings, and a failure to respect the ancient instincts of a predator. The woman at the center of it was not a careless novice. In our story, her name is Elena Marquez, 44 years old, head of the laboratory and the lifeblood of the Pearl Farm. She was respected not just for her expertise in pearl cultivation, but for her steady leadership and quiet resilience. For years, she nurtured delicate mollusks with the same care others might reserve for prize gardens, overseeing every step of the painstaking process that transformed them into gleaming treasures. Colleagues remembered her as the first to arrive and the last to leave, the one who could solve a crisis with a calm word and a steady hand. Outside the lab, Elena was woven into the rhythms of Minahasa life, known for her warm smile, her readiness to help, and her unshakable work ethic. To her, the Pearl Farm was more than an employer. It was family, a place of belonging. And that was the problem. Familiarity had dulled her awareness of the dangers around her, especially one particular danger that she had learned to walk past without a second thought. That danger was Mary, a saltwater crocodile unlike anything most people ever see outside of documentaries. 14 feet from snout to tail, weighing over 1,500 pounds, Mary was not an animal to be underestimated. His massive body was sheathed in armor-like scales, each ridge a reminder of his prehistoric lineage. His jaws could crush bone as easily as a dry twig. For millions of years, his kind had ruled the waterways of Southeast Asia and Northern Australia, perfecting the art of ambush, floating still as driftwood until the moment to strike arrived. He was the ultimate opportunist, capable of taking down anything that entered his reach. Fishbirds, wild boar, and if the chance came, humans. Mary's very presence at the Pearl Farm was a violation of nature and law alike. Saltwater crocodiles were never meant to live penned up in concrete pools, especially not in a facility ill-equipped to contain them. The enclosure's low walls and open edges might have been enough for a smaller species, but for a predator of Mary's size, it was laughable. There were no secondary barriers, no reinforced gates, nothing to ensure that a startled leap or a sudden lunge wouldn't carry him halfway out of the water. Over the years, whispers had circulated among workers, stories of close calls during feeding time of Mary surging toward the edge with frightening speed, his massive head snapping at the air just feet from where someone stood. These warnings drifted through the Pearl Farm like smoke, noticed for a moment, then waved away. Experts would later describe such arrangements as A ticking time bomb, an accident, waiting for the wrong set of circumstances to ignite it. You cannot ever relax around a crocodile of that size, one herpetologist told the press afterward. They're patient, they remember, and they take opportunities when they come. For Elena, Mary was part of the background, dangerous, yes, but familiar. And familiarity is a dangerous illusion. Day after day, she worked in Mary's shadow, never knowing that each step near that enclosure was a coin toss between life and death. Eyewitness accounts combined with the grim revelations from the investigation stripped away any illusion that Mary's captivity had been properly managed. The crocodile's so-called enclosure was nothing more than a bare concrete pool, its water clouded and its edges worn from years of weather and neglect. On paper, it was a contained space. In reality, it was a shallow attempt to restrain an apex predator whose very design defied confinement. The low walls surrounding the pond were barely chest-high on an adult human, nowhere near sufficient to hold back a 14-foot, 1,500-pound saltwater crocodile capable of launching its bulk upward in an explosive surge. There were no reinforced gates, no overhanging barriers to block an upward leap, and no secondary fences to keep people from wandering too close. It was a flawed system from the ground up, a dangerous mix of underestimation and poor planning that left both workers and visitors vulnerable. The investigation also pulled into the open a troubling undercurrent of stories, rumors that had circulated quietly among the staff for years. Whispers told of feeding times that turned into near disasters, when Mary would explode from the water in a blur of muscle and teeth jaws, snapping shut just shy of a startled worker's leg. Some claimed that they had seen him glare from just beneath the surface, unblinking and still before lunging without warning at anyone who stepped too close to the edge. These were not the exaggerated tales of outsiders. They came from people who had been there, who had felt the rush of displaced water and heard the bone-deep crack of his jaws slamming shut. But the incidents had never been formally reported, filed away instead, under close calls in the dangerous calculus of working around a creature that was never meant to be there in the first place. Among the workers at the Pearl Farm, there had always been murmurs. Offhand warnings passed between shifts, muttered half-jokes about keeping your distance from Mary. These weren't official memos or documented safety reports. They were the kind of quiet alerts you share when you've seen something unsettling, but no, management won't take it seriously. That's just Mary being Mary, some would say, brushing off the unease. But behind the humor was a growing fear because everyone knew the truth. A crocodile like that, kept without permits, without trained handlers, and without the kind of reinforced enclosure such a predator demands, was more than an accident waiting to happen. It was a glaring red warning light no one in power seemed willing to acknowledge. Local conservation officials had tried more than once to address it. Reports later revealed that multiple visits were made by government wildlife officers, each time with the same goal to inspect the facility and deal with the illegally kept crocodile. But every time they were turned away at the gates, whether it was the owner's stubbornness, denial, or a calculated effort to avoid consequences, the result was the same: no oversight, no intervention, and a wild predator left in conditions that defied reason. By normalizing such extreme risk, the Pearl Farm's management created the perfect breeding ground for disaster. The stage was set. The only question left was when. The morning of January 10, 2019 began without warning signs. The sun climbed over the horizon, spilling gold over the calm sea and casting long shadows across the farm. Elena Marquez moved through her day with the quiet efficiency that had become second nature, checking on pearl oysters, reviewing lab samples, moving between the sterile lab and the open-air work areas. Somewhere in that routine, her path took her to Mary's enclosure. Whether she intended to feed him or simply inspect the area is unknown, but investigators believe she was within arm's reach of the pond's edge when the moment came. Former worker Pak Naim later explained the feeding method, tapping the concrete wall to draw Mary to the surface, then tossing food into the water. It was a risky ritual performed so often it had probably lost its edge of danger in the workers' minds. Imagine the scene: Elena at the edge, a bucket of fish or chicken in her hands, the rhythmic tap of her knuckles on concrete echoing across the still water. She might have leaned forward, scanning the murk for any sign of movement. She wouldn't have seen him, not until it was far too late. From beneath, Mary waited. Perfectly still, his body blending into the shadows of the enclosure floor, he felt the vibrations, smelled the scent of food, and locked into his target. When he struck, it wasn't gradual, it was an eruption. The surface exploded in a geyser of water and scales, a 14-foot predator launching upward with terrifying precision. His jaws, lined with teeth honed by millions of years of evolution, snapped shut with bone-crushing force. The attack would have been instantaneous, giving her no chance to scream, no time to react. The sheer mass of the crocodile, over 1,500 pounds, wrenched her off her feet, dragging her forward and into the churning water. Their instinct took over. Mary rolled his massive body, twisting violently a death roll, designed to tear and drown in a single motion. The water turned opaque with mud and blood, swallowing every sound except the muffled chaos beneath the surface. Seconds later, it was over. The pond went still again, as if nothing had happened. By dawn the next morning, January 11th, unease began to ripple through the pearl farm. Elena, always punctual, was nowhere to be found. Workers searched the grounds, their steps inevitably drawing them toward the crocodile enclosure. What they found there froze them in place. Her body floated near the surface, pale against the murky green water. Mary lurked nearby, his eyes just breaking the surface, watching. The scene was worse than anything they had imagined. Her right hand was gone, severed cleanly. A large portion of her abdomen had been torn away, leaving injuries so brutal they spoke volumes about the sheer force of the attack. The workers staggered back, some shouting in shock, others covering their faces, unable to look. One man fumbled for his phone, his hands trembling as he called the authorities. The moment Elena Marquez's body was found, the pearl farm's quiet isolation shattered. Within minutes, sirens cut through the humid morning air, growing louder, until the narrow road to the facility was swarmed with vehicles. Local police arrived first, their armed officers fanning out to secure the grounds. Paramedics followed, though it was already too late for Elena. Most critical of all were the officials from the North Sulawesi Natural Resources Conservation Agency, veteran wildlife experts who understood exactly what they were walking into. Inside that enclosure, the killer still waited, 14 feet of raw prehistoric power, weighing over 1,500 pounds, with the strength to crush bone and drag a grown human under in seconds. This was no ordinary capture. Mary had just killed a human. His blood was up, his instincts sharp. Approaching him meant risking another life. It took dozens of people police, for security conservation officers, with tranquilizer rifles, handlers with ropes and nets, and machine operators ready to lift a living, thrashing mass of reptilian muscle. For nearly 3 tense hours, they worked in careful stages, inching closer, reading his body language, waiting for the perfect moment to strike with a dart. When it finally took effect, the massive crocodile's movements slowed his ancient eyes, still fixed on the human circling him. Even sedated, his bulk was dangerous to move. With ropes looped tight and machinery straining, the team hauled him from the pond, loading him onto a flatbed truck for transport to the Tasikoki Wildlife Rescue Center, a place built for his kind, with proper containment and professional oversight. But removing Mary didn't erase what had happened. News of the attack ripped through Minahasa and far beyond, carried by national headlines and international broadcasts. The shock of Elena's violent death merged with outrage over the revelation that Mary had been kept illegally for years despite repeated warnings. An autopsy confirmed what no one doubted: her fatal wounds were from the crushing bite and tearing force of a saltwater crocodile. The images painted by those findings were almost too brutal to comprehend, and they poured fuel on the public fury. The farm's Japanese owner, whose name was withheld in many reports, quickly became the focus of police efforts. Witness statements and agency records showed that authorities had tried multiple times to seize the crocodile before, but were blocked from entering. Each denial was now damning evidence of deliberate evasion, feeding suspicions of negligence or worse. As protests began in nearby towns, conservationists and former workers stepped forward to speak on record about the danger everyone had known was coming. They told the same story over and over. Mary was too large, too aggressive, and too poorly contained. The farm's inaction had been a gamble with lives, and Elena had paid the price. The crocodile's relocation closed one chapter, but the investigation pressed on. Regulatory bodies came under scrutiny for why enforcement had failed, why earlier attempts at intervention had stopped at the gate. The incident became a rallying cry for stricter wildlife laws and actual enforcement with teeth. For Elena's community, the media storm eventually faded, but the loss remained raw. Her absence was felt not only in the lab, but in the fabric of daily life, at markets and neighborhood gatherings, in the quiet spaces where her warm smile used to be. People spoke of her with grief, but also with anger, at a death they believed didn't have to happen. In the end, her story became more than just a headline. It was a brutal reminder of the unforgiving line between human enterprise and wild instinct, a line that cannot be blurred without consequences. It underscored a truth as old as nature itself. No matter how familiar an apex predator might seem, no matter how many quiet mornings pass without incident, it will always be what it was born to be. And so as the tropical sun sank over North Sulawesi, the water in Mary's former enclosure lay still once again. Yet in that stillness lingered a question no one could quite shake. How many warnings does it take before we listen? How many close calls before we admit that nature's patience is finite? The answer, as it so often is, had come at the highest possible price.